Hey guys, my name is Rye, and today I want to talk a little bit about the key I timed, which is a 14 Grim Batol, and how I decided to approach this key on my Preservation Evoker. In the last comments, and immediately after I posted my last video on Arakara, I had a couple DMs asking specifically for this key, where some of my pain points were, what I thought was good approaches to some of the bosses and trash, and what I do to help my team get through this very difficult dungeon. Starting off the bat, and one thing I haven't noted in my other videos is before you put the key in, you can cast Tip the Scales, which is your 2-minute CD, and get an entire free use of it, as the item will reset, or ability will reset when the key starts. You can actually get 2 uses right off the bat. So when preparing into this grouping, I immediately hit a Tip Fire Breath, I prep a Stasis here, I use Tip the Scales, and I put a Spirit Bloom out for full healing. This pack is pretty standard now in most pug routes. Again, this is a group I'm not normally playing with. This tank is new. This rogue, it was his key, and I do have 1 or 2 DPS friends in here, so we are in communication. In this first pack, the only big thing that I'm really worried about is making sure that I can 1, LOS the dragon, and 2, make sure that my tank receives a lot of healing. Depending on what your group composition is, what stops you're using, etc., and how big this pull is, one of the only things you really need to worry about in your Preservation Evoker is kicking the Mass Tremor, and using all your healing CDs you can to keep up your team and your tank. One thing to note is that, again, similar to my Arakara video or my Dawnbreaker video, this first pull is something that you can commit almost every healing button to. If you feel like there's a lot of people taking unnecessarily damage from either earth bolts, things on the ground, or your tank's getting absolutely slammed, it's completely okay to use Stasis, Rewind, Emerald Communion, Time Dilation, Zephyr, and both your charges of Obsidian Scales here. I like to front load absolutely everything on this pack, including Zephyr on the first pack. I did not choose to use Scales, just in case. I didn't think I needed it, but if you feel like that you want to stay out, maybe you're a little bit overloaded thinking about what's going on, feel free to just use Scales as you see casts coming at you, and it could save you. My tank does do a pretty big pull here. I did not expect him to take the Overseer into this pack, and as you can see, I ripped Time Dilation as well as Rewind on a single target heal for him. The rest of this pack is pretty much just my DPS blasting and me using as many globals as I think necessary to keep up my tank. As you can see, there's some casts going on me here, and again, in one of my last videos I did kind of share that I'm usually a shot caller in all of my pugs as well as my coordinated group setting, but this is a group that I have not really played with before. This is right out of LFG with our tank, so yeah. I think a common misconception about the early packs here is that you need to be doing all these complicated things. I think as a healer, your number one goal is just keeping up your party as you go. Make sure you're using Stasis, make sure you're using Rewind and Communion to keep up your tank if needed. One tip too that isn't exclusive to Preservation Evoker, but when you're in here, especially when you're pugging, it's completely okay to leave a bunch of your number 1 button on the dragon. I like to spam a lot of number 2 in this backpack here, just to make sure that, as everybody in my team's going to be hitting it, that I can save my 1s for on the way back to see what I can hit. I do choose, I think, to hit one of the number 1 buttons, like the big nukes on that caster pack, because I find in a lot of groups, people pull those 3 casters in, and when you're not in communication with your team, or maybe you're not really used to who you're playing with, sometimes kicks can go off, and I think more deadly than anything here is Mass Tremors, as well as Earth Bolts, just 1 or 2 shotting your team. We go to the next pack here, and I'm watching for kicks, and I think when everything gets grouped, I do hit a Pressing Roar here, and I call that we should use Capacitor Totem. And it does go out, and again, I'm ramping my Stasis here. I use Tip the Scales, I spend my Zephyr, and I have a full ramp right now. As you can see, I did make a mistake with my ramp. It doesn't matter too much here, at least, as I did put a reversion in it. Right now, the entire important thing is if somebody gets earth bolted, somebody gets by the dragon, or my tank needs healing, I have a full Spirit Bloom in my Stasis, which I just released there. So the wind's going off here. I do choose to hit to hide behind this again. Every one of these dragon casts is LOSable, so you can use the walls or you can use the bridge as needed. And I'm continuing just healing my tank. Again, I think I can't place enough importance on this. It is way more important that your tank lives than you do more damage within a key. So this first boss is kind of interesting. At lower key levels, there's really not much to it. You don't really need to think about it, you don't really do anything, but as you kind of get to the 14, 15 level, you're going to start to notice that his AoE, the Commanding Roar, can one-shot you. So what I like to do in this fight is for every single Commanding Roar, I have coverage. On this first one here, I make sure that I use Obsidian Scales for Noon Blaze, and right away, what am I doing is I'm using my Life Bind and my Spirit Bloom to make sure my party is topped. Every single time somebody takes one of these spikes, I also like to make sure that they have an echo on them, so when the damage goes out, I can top them quickly with a Verdant Embrace, a Living Flame, or something else. Make sure that your team's always top before any of these damage events. There's no rhythm or cadence that you absolutely need to follow in this, but it is kind of useful to make sure that you use things like your Communion, your Rewind, your Lifebind ramps, as well as your Spirit Bloom to top your party. As you can see here, I haven't been picked yet, but every time my DPS gets picked, I put some Echoes out, and I use a Life Spark proc, and some Dream Breath for a little bit of coating. Another important thing too that not a lot of Preservation Evokers do know is you can use Cauterize on the Tank Buster on this fight for your tank. This is a huge damage mitigation for them, and it makes their life a lot easier. Just if you're not practiced of using it, just use it on cooldown. I'm sure your tank will be really happy. Again, rocks come out, I throw some Echoes, I use Life Bind, and I Living Flame myself to get the Life Bind value out of the Living Flame. So coming up here, I notice that I don't have Zephyr. I decide I'm going to use Obsidian Scales and Renewed Blaze again, as you can see right below my actions. And we're back into it. One important thing to note is when I woke up today, and I'm not really sure why, but my details action tracker is not working, so I'm sorry that that's not available for this key. As you can see there, I almost blinked, and I did blink into another rock puddle. The only reason why I lived is I was quick enough to get a health pot off. A really good important trick on this boss that I note too is there, for instance, I actually didn't end up using much in terms of being able to live, but if you are playing Chrono Warden and Keys, which you probably should, for mechanics that you find yourself getting one shot on, or maybe like you're not used to having to use your Obsidian Scales in every single kind of mechanic, using hover right before the cast goes off, the commanding shout, can give you up to a 20% DR. So you'll notice I do it here a couple times that I hover right before that cast starts, and it gives me a little bit of a buffer. I did choose my rescue target on this fight to be my Elemental Shaman, so you can see that anytime I don't have Obsidian Scales, I don't have Zephyr, and I want to be a little safer than just using hover, I am rescuing my Elemental Shaman. For those that are kind of new to Preservation Evoker or new to Evoker in general, if you are running the rescue talent in the Evoker class tree, it will give you and your ally a 30% health shield for 5 seconds. Nothing too crazy here. We go on with the fight. We're getting pretty unlucky with a little bit of the placements from the boss, but that's okay. Nothing too crazy here. I do TD my tank here, as I think he's a little bit scared. I don't have Cauterize for the bleed, and he doesn't have Dwarf. Again, I think the biggest trick to this fight, and especially making sure you can top your party before all the damage events, is just making sure you get those Echoes out, you use your Verdant Embrace, and you go into that Life Bind. You'd be really surprised about how impactful this can be in almost every mechanic in Keys, especially this season with how powerful Chrono Warden is and how powerful Spirit Bloom is. You often don't even need a full charge Spirit Bloom. Often just charging up to 1 for about a second or so is more than enough to top your party. When you get into these packs, another thing I like to do is, again, if I'm not blowing the boss for a while, I like to prep stasis. And the thing is, like, as soon as I get my healing started, as you can see there, I wall and Renew and Blaze the first one, I open my stasis, I Spirit Bloom, I get a Temporal Anomaly, and I get my Dream Breath out. The reason why is you never know what can happen to these Molten Giants. Obviously, these are very good players. These are players around the 3200 range as of current, as of this date in November. And so traditionally, they're either title players or, you know, they know how to communicate, know how to call their stops and kicks. So getting into this pack, one important thing to note is making sure you have some healing ready in case people do miss a kick. Make sure you're using your kick as well. Using your utility to stop the casts, but the most important thing, and that I find is the most problematic in these packs, is the Giant's going to cast Molten Wake, and somebody in your party could also get overlapped with the Shadow Flame cast. If you personally had to choose between kicking the Shadow Flame and the Chained Mind, I would definitely go for the Shadow Flame. If you ever do get the overlap with the Molten Wake from the Giant and the Shadow Flame, one of your team members is going to die unless they have a big defensive. I did rescue my Shaman there just in case that cast did go through. As you can see, I have kick on cooldown. I don't have as much agency. I had my one stop there, and now I'm just back to blasting the pack. One tip to note that is on this trash, I would actually avoid overcommitting too much in these giants unless you really need to. This boss does kind of have a high HPS requirement, and you do need a lot of buttons to kind of get through it. Feel free to use your walls on this pack. When I mean wall, I say obsidian scales and your renewing blaze. I would try to save at least rewind for the pack, and if you're going to use communion, maybe use it on the first giant. We do opt here that Lust is coming up in 15 seconds, but we are waiting on some cooldowns, so we decide to do one more Molten Giant pack before going into the boss. Again, this has been a pretty clean run so far. We've had no hiccups, no deaths. We're feeling pretty cozy. I'm really proud of my team here for a lot of the communication we have in terms of like our kicks, especially for having playing with people I don't normally play with. Again, I kind of do the bread and butter life bind, spirit plume. As you can see, I'm getting cast on, so I get a little scared. And again, too, you can see below my character pane, I do have renewing blaze and I do have obsidian scales ready for the boss. Once we go into this next boss, you're going to notice a pretty common theme, just as I've kind of talked about in other bosses and on trash. Every time that the boss chooses a weapon, he's going to go out and do his AoE damage pattern, which is going to tick you over about 6 seconds and do, on this key level, approximately like 140% of my party's life. So what I end up doing is I go and prepare some echoes, I go into my life bind, and I spirit bloom. On the pull here with Lust, I do like to have my Tip the Scales Fire Breath ready, so I get all that extra haste. It's going to make my opener a lot more fluid. I go into Stasis, I Spirit Bloom, I TA, and I Dream Breath. One thing that my entire group did wrong here is we all tunneled and we let our mage die to an Earthbolt cast in the opener, which absolutely sucked for him because this was his Lust, his Spy Masters, and everything. So all of us took ownership over the fact that anybody, including the mage, could have actually made that kick and saved them, but we do recover here, we do battle res him, I do release my stasis on the next weapon, and this is the harder part of the fight right now. Once the boss casts Molten Fury, he's going to send out 3 debuffs onto the party. These debuffs are going to tick you down and eventually drop some puddles underneath you. I do make a mistake here, and I end up using both Rewind and Emerald Communion. Why I think this is personally a mistake is the best way to approach, I think, the weapon phase is doing a raw Spirit Bloom for the actual debuffs and then using Communion or Rewind for the AoE in the weapon phase and weapon change phase. So I ended up using both there, which is very costly to me because like that's a lot of healing potential lost, right? I did call for Mass Barrier there just in case, but my Spirit Bloom does get us topped off. Now we're baiting and we're back into the easy phase of the fight for another 6 seconds before we go into the fun phase. This time I am a little bit more scared as we go into Forged Swords. My Paladin does decide to spell ward me. I don't call for that. I think I was more than fine, as you could see as I hit Obsidian Scales. So these debuffs go out. I have 1 charge of Scales. I think I decide to use it here. I do. And I'm going to Life Bind into a Spirit Bloom. And what I'm going to do here is I TD my Shaman, I think. No, I don't. So it seems like even there, right? Like even with my stasis, it was more than enough to get me through that entire damage portfolio profile. And then we're back into the kiting phase. My Paladin does decide to bubble. And here we go. I send out my echoes, I life bind, and this time I tip the scale Spirit Bloom and it fully tops my party instantly. My mana is good, my team is healthy, and right now I could pretty much just hit the boss with Living Flame if I want to. What I am a little bit concerned of up here is if we go and get this next weapon phase, it is going to be scary for me. So I do get some Echoes Splend out, I rescue, I life bind, and I use Spirit Bloom to top my party. The boss is at 8%. I know I don't have to commit a lot, but given that mistake I made earlier with the commune and the rewind in one go, I am a little bit scared right now. I do decide to use my life bind early, Spirit Bloom, and I am unfortunately the last one to get the debuff. Luckily, I do health pot there, I do TD my Shaman, and I do make sure I get a heal off on Hollow and the boss dies. If that boss did go on any longer, that could have been a really unfortunate scenario. I think we probably could have ended up losing people. I don't think we would have wiped, but we might have lost Hollow there. And that's all because I made that one mistake of communing too early on the first weapon phase and not having anything later in the fight when I was really dry. So far, we have about 20 minutes left in the key. It means our timer is great. We're about 2 minutes ahead of where we want to be. And our goal, even in my head, is I want to beat the old timer in every key. I don't want it the minute and a half. I just want to make sure that we're playing clean. I want to make sure that we're not dying, that our DPS aren't dying. They're getting used to their Spy Master stacks. My tank's alive. So I think I encouraged my team here that we don't have to do anything fancy. We're halfway through the key. We've done a lot of the hard part, but the trash in here before the third boss is both very difficult to heal and to tank. So I think we do make the call that we have Deathmark and Kingsbane available from our Rogue. We do have Ascendance from our Ellie Shaman. And our tank did have to use Bubble in the last pack, so he's a little scared right now. One thing to note is these debuffs that come out here, you can heal them up, but one important thing is that you can also cauterize them. However, cauterize is on a 1 minute CD, so you have to be very careful about when you're using your cauterize in these packs. We did choose to go and get 2 Curse Dispels for this key. So we do have a Shaman and Mage. And I do think Preservation Evoker is probably a bad choice for the ski, because it does mean that to make the ski really easy on you as a healer, and for your team, it is good to have 2 Curse Dispels, which means you need to bring either 2 Shamans, a Mage, a Druid, etc. One thing that did happen there is our Mage actually got Threat, which was kind of funny. He popped off in the opener, our tank didn't have a lot of threat, he managed to pull aggro and he died. So nothing I could have done there, nothing too crazy, but we do kind of continue on. Again, you'll notice in a lot of these packs, especially as you get into the Lavamancer, I am using Stasis as kind of a bad heal. What I mean by that is, similar to other videos, I like having Stasis on cooldown, because you never know when people are going to take large chunks of damage, people are going to miss kicks, and you know, you releasing that Stasis in a split second with a big Spirit Plume in it could be the difference between one of your team members living and dying. A lot of my healing here is into my tank. We're watching kicks, we're calling stops as best as we can, and I'm making sure that when the Enveloping Shadows goes out, my Mage and my Shaman are helping decurse. We do decide to split this pull up with the Lava Bender in the 4-pack, though typically this is one big pull. What this means for me is right now I can sit on Stasis. Usually every time you fight a Lava Bender, you want at least 1 healing CD, if not Stasis +1. What I really recommend trying to do is every time you're going to fight a Lava Bender is having Stasis ready, and maybe even also having either Emerald Communion or Rewind. In this pack, the only thing that's kind of going on is my tank is getting blitzed. My team is getting kind of shot at by some bolts, and we're avoiding frontals, so not too much. I don't like that we split this up, although I think I was a contributor to not blowing the Lava Bender with this. I think if we have cooldowns, like as you can see, our Rogue is sitting on Kingsbane and Deathmark. Our Shaman doesn't have Ascendance, but our Mage does have buttons. We should have probably pulled all that together, but that's okay. Lava Benders. Now, this is the second time we're going to fight one in this instance, except this time it's all solo. We do have damage going into this. The Rogue does send, the Mage sends, and the Shaman is holding for next pack. So as you can kind of see here, I start ramping for the Ascension. I do end up using a Life Bind here. I put my Stasis. I tip the Scale, Spirit Plume, and I go in with a TA into Dream Breath. That pack died so fast, I didn't need to do any other healing, which was kind of a waste. And I regret here in this moment, as I remember feeling the ski, that I shouldn't have used Stasis there because of how much damage we had. But it is better safe to be sorry. Looking at my healing cooldowns, I do have Communion coming up right now. I have Time Dilation, I have Rewind, and I have Mind Pirate spells. Remember on these packs too, you should be using your Obsidian Scales and your Renewing Blaze as liberally as possible. Use things like Zephyr to help your team take less damage from the Lava Bender, and don't be afraid to start using your healing buttons as early as the Ascension starts. As you can see, I communed pretty early there, and I think what I end up doing is rewinding here maybe. Oh, I noticed that the pack's dead, so I don't even bother. So I'm still sitting on Rewind. I see that the Warlock is dead, Lava Bender's dead, but you can even look at my buttons, like we would have been still very healthy. I am out of walls at this point, but I did have Rescue, and I did have Rewind, and I did have Time Dilation. The route that my tank did choose is splitting up this pull and the next pull. The next pull, and even this pull, as you could probably see, is pretty difficult on your tank. There's some tank busters that go out, and there's a lot of casts. I did use Time Dilation there on my Shaman, as he did get bolted, and I thought he was going to get bolted again. A mistake I made here is instead of actually just using time dilation, which is a valuable external, which my tank might need in the next pack, is I should have just looked up and communicated that I was going to kick, right? Like, ultimately, that was my mistake. I wasted external instead when I could have kicked. As you could see in the last frame, I did cauterize my rogue, and we got rid of all the curses very quickly. As these key levels go up, these curses are very, very difficult, although they are healable if 1 or 2 goes out. If you get multiple of them and there's other damage like a lava bender, they're very, very hard and tricky. Yeah, this is just an easy 4-pack. I open with Tip the Scales Fire Breath, and I'm blasting away. I know right now that there's no damage going to be on my team. All that there is tank damage, a couple kicks, and making sure that we don't pull any other mobs like AoE and those lava benders back there. I do call for Cap Totem. It was before my Pressing Roar, which I made a mistake on. And you can see we're just kind of cleaning up this pack really quickly. We do have Lust coming up in 15 seconds, which means our timer is phenomenal. We're very fast right now, and we're well ahead where I thought we needed to be in the key. So I said, hey, we can take our time, we can take it slow. We have Lust coming up. We don't do anything fancy. For some of you that are a little bit new to higher keys and some of the strategies that some of us do, this boss is going to be pretty interesting to you. It's not going to be probably the way that you might see it in some of your pug keys, but this does make this boss very, very, very easy. This is a tank safe spotting tactic that we're going to see. On this boss, you have absolutely nothing really to heal on this fight. It's very easy. The only thing you really need to do is look out for the curses. And once we get into phase 2, I'm going to show you how I handle them personally. I always tell my DPS personally to never use their globals on decurse on this fight. I know that sounds a little bit egotistical, but the reason why is Spirit Bloom can always full top your party on every single one of them. There's not a lot of damage on this fight when using this strategy in particular, so you'll see kind of the cadence that I chose and the approach that I did when healing this fight, and you'll see why I said that. I'm at 61% mana, we have Lust, we have all our DPS cooldowns, and we're going into this fight. As you'll see here, Lath is actually going to go and pull the dragon into this cubby. Doing this makes the adds always spawn right underneath the boss and makes it very, very easy to deal with. As you can see, I tell my DPS not to decurse, I go and lifeline ramp them, I get a Spirit Bloom up, and they're fully topped. One good practice is when you're doing lower keys, I would start practicing this boss, making sure that you have some sort of defensive for every single one of the dragon knockbacks. Now, on the first one, I called that I was going to use Suffer. I think on the next one, we use Mass Barrier, and so forth. I can see on the right-hand side of my screen, my timer is coming down, and the curses are coming down in 3 seconds. So what do? Echo, 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 Life Bind, and then release my Stasis, and the party is topped instantly. That took me all of 1 global, as opposed to taking them to do multiple globals to potentially help on decursing. So I just told them, you guys blast the boss, you're in CDs, etc., you'll be fine. So on that one, we do get Mass Barrier, I do Rescue, and I did use Renewed Blaze, and my party's all topped off. If I chose not to use any sort of defensive capability on this boss, I'm pretty sure I would die to a one-shot. If I do run out of things, I have things like Rescue, I do have my Hover, which can give me a 20% DR if I time it, and we're back to blasting. I Life Bind, I Spirit Bloom, and my party is topped. As you can see, I'm weaving in and out a little bit frequently here to make sure Lath gets his reversion on him for Grace Period, and we're back at it. I do use a charge of Obsidian Scales. I decide I want to rewind that one for no particular reason, other than I just felt like, hey, maybe I missed a global in my head, maybe I felt a little bit more comfy just to use it there. I don't really need rewind for the next couple minutes, so I do decide to use it there. I get my Echoes out, I Life Bind, and I Spirit Bloom, and my party is topped. This is currently in my stasis, so I have a 3-charge Spirit Bloom. I do decide to hover, and I do decide to release my stasis here. The boss is almost dead, so at this point, I don't really need to think about using things like Emerald Communion or Tip the Scales, though I can. The boss is going to die pretty quickly. I start getting some Echoes out. I Life Bind, I Spirit Bloom, and my party is topped instantly. The reason why we like to do the strategy is we don't want to play those lava benders. As the key levels kind of go up, those lava benders become very difficult to play, and you need to commit a lot of resources into them. They are worth a lot of count though, so if you can figure it out, good for you, and I think that that's completely an option or an available strategy to do. I don't think this season's completely figured out in terms of Rudian, so I think like as things kind of develop, as we're only about 2 months in, things are still changing quite a bit. You're going to see different routes, different metas, different classes, and different and better ways to pull things as the season goes on to the end. As you watch this video, you might see that now, or maybe a month from now, this is not the same approach a lot of people do take to Grim Batol. We do try to skip this dragon, and we actually have a hiccup. Somebody goes out too far, and it looks like it aggroes to hollow. Somehow he does pull it, which is really unfortunate. This doesn't affect our timer, thankfully, as we've had a really clean run. We only have 2 deaths, and there were 2 one of them was pretty impactful, one of them was very negligible. This does mean we just have extra count in the dungeon, and we do have to waste a little bit of time beating up this dragon. This does cost us, I think, in total about 45 seconds to a minute, so I do start to get a little bit, thinking about, hey, where's our timer at? Do we need to do anything crazy? My team asks if we need to do a double, and I think that we don't. So we're just going to kill the dragon and go on our way. As you can see, even with this dragon that we pulled here, I'm trying my best to LOS it. You can negate all the damage from the dragon, and it can become pretty deadly. A second big part of that is I really want to use and save my defenses for these packs up here. One common thing that I have been asked is how do I heal these guys in Grim Batol? Now, there seems to be a little bit of a misconception that Prez struggles with single target healing, but similar to my Arakara video, or even in my Dawnbreaker video, I talk a lot about how you can overcome single target healing as Preservation, and I would argue it's probably one of the strongest single target healers in the game because of Golden Hour, especially with very large radiant damage spikes. You can see here, we do have a big debuff out. I do decide to rescue and to blow my entire stasis on P-Wave. So again, common thing you're going to see here is Echo, into Reversion, into Spirit Bloom, into Life Spark procs. You can see at my party at all time, I do try to keep as much as possible Temporal Anomaly and Reversion on them. The reason why is Life Spark procs on single target healing are exceptionally valuable. I'm often not using them for damage, but to make sure that I have a way to instantly heal my party members as they get picked by the Faceless Corruptors. So I do have TA out, I hit Reversion, there you go, it's on me, and this is really lucky because this first one, as all the ads are blowing up, is I have Renewing Blaze. Also too, I get Sacrificed. I don't even have to use a wall here. But ideally, if I didn't have a prop paladin, I probably would have used Obsidian Scales as well as Renewing Blaze, just as when these ads blow up. With the debuff going out, you can die in 1 or 2 globals, if not instantly. So here comes the very hard pack for Preservation, supposedly. As you can see here, I'm getting ready. I have Reversions out. I want to get as many Life Spark procs as possible. I get Echoes out, and the first one's on me. I immediately hit Obsidian Scales. I prep a Stasis. I use a full charge Spirit Bloom, and I use my Dream Breath. Again, the reason why I'm doing this is because this combo is going to give the most possible healing to my party for the next debuffs. Even if I'm not the one selected, as Stasis replicates healing, there's a good chance that I could just release my Spirit Bloom and it's going to heal them a ton. I get chosen again and use my second charge of Obsidian Scales here, and I release my Stasis. At this part, one could say that we're actually pretty lucky. We did have our mage have Invis. They went on me while I had 2 charged defensives, and I'm watching out for my shaman. He does have wall. So one of them does go down as the rogue gets chosen there, and we got really good luck on this pack. I ask my shaman to use his wall, but he actually decides not to use it, and so what I end up doing is just using an Echo, Reversion, Echo, Spirit Bloom, Life Spark proc, and he is stopped. Again, these tools are very good on Preservation. I don't think that we should help share the idea that Prez doesn't get single target healing. It's actually really strong. Even in scenarios where we got a little bit less luck, I had Communion, I had Rewind, I had Tip the Scales, I had everything. This boss, right off the bat, when you pull it, he does his AoE about 6 seconds in. As you can see there, I did not have Stasis because of the pack before that. So what I chose to do and chose to elect was I put some Echoes out, I used Renewing Blaze, I Verdant Embraced, and started using my Life Bind combo, which is Echo, 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 Verdant Embrace into my Life Bind, and using Spirit Bloom. This part of the fight can also be kind of scary as well. Kind of the entire cadence of this fight is making sure that you have enough burst healing to handle the like 6 to 8 second rot that happens twice throughout the encounter, at the start of the fight and the middle of the fight. So as you can see here, I go into my next kind of ramp, and I actually make a huge mistake. I verdant embrace to my shaman, and I get stuck in a tentacle. I do use rewind to kind of make that coverage, and we are completely topped. So at this point still, I do have stasis, I do have Emerald Communion, I do have a charge of Scales and Renewed Blaze. Personally, I like using Renewed Blaze and Scales for this phase of the fight, not the big AoE phase. I find this circle's a lot more deadly, but since you do have a lot of options with Zephyr, Stasis, etc., you can use whatever you need. I do use, here I used Renewed Blaze and a combo with a Spirit Bloom to make sure that myself and the mage is stopped. The rogue does go down there because he ends up standing too far out in the Shadow Swirlies. So that was a little bit unlucky. Going up to my next ramp. I think here I might commune. Oh, no, I released my stasis here. And as you can see, everybody stopped. Again, Echo, 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 Verdant Embrace, Life Bind, release stasis from the other phase, and we are top to go. Now, looking at my buttons, I'm starting to think about what I have in this next phase of the fight, right? This phase is a little bit scary, as you know, any one of us can get chosen with the circle. So I put some echoes out, Echo, Echo, Echo. I Life Bind, and I use Tip the Scales and Spirit Bloom to keep them topped. I tell them that they're not in danger at all, and they shouldn't have to worry, as a lot of my passive healing with my empowered spells, my Spirit Bloom, and my Life Bind are going to keep them topped for the entire part of that encounter. I see the boss at 20%, we have an AoE coming up in 3 seconds, and the only thing I really have left here is Communion, so I do call that I'm going to be communioning this ramp. I hit Communion, and my team is completely topped during the entire duration of the damage. We have less than 10 seconds, these ads are blowing up, and all we have to do is live through one circle phase. So we're trying to find the safe spot. Again, I have time dilation here, I have scales if I need it. Lust goes out, so I have a ton of haste, which makes healing very easy for me. I Life Bind, and I use a Spirit Bloom. The party's topped, I use my empowereds, and the boss goes down, and that is how we timed a plus 14 Grim Batol. I do think that this is one of the more challenging keys this season to heal. I think the HPS requirement is pretty high throughout the key in a lot of various spots, and when it's not, you're often healing the tank for a ton. There's a good trade-off and a good balance in this key, and I actually really enjoy healing it. One tip to note is I didn't change up anything for my talents here, I didn't do anything kind of crazy, but as you guys saw, I probably have the most uses of my Rewind, my Communion, and my Stasis in this key. I think using them on cooldown, especially on trash, to kind of make sure that you have a little bit of a buffer when fighting some enemy mobs is really useful, and especially when you're fighting lava benders. Anyway, I hope this video was helpful. I'm going to drop a link to my Discord below if you have any questions or have any other requests regarding what key you'd like to see next. Whether it's a boss, a key in itself, or some type of area, feel free to drop me a line, and hope you guys have a good day.